Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here. Of course, this past weekend at SDCC was a huge boon for Star Trek news enthusiasts. We got a whole bunch of information about Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Short Treks, and Star Trek Picard. In this video, I'm going to summarize all of everything we learned about Short Treks. Earlier this week, I did all my videos on Star Trek Picard, and later on, I'll do videos on the news from Star Trek Discovery. But this video is going to focus on Short Treks, which we have learned will be coming starting this fall on CBS All Access in the States. There will be 6 episodes of Short Treks this time around, 4 live action and 2 animated. Last month we learned that at least one of the Short Treks would be featuring some of the Enterprise crew, for sure Number 1 and Mr. Spock. At SDCC, however, we learned that 3 will actually feature the Pike-era crew of the USS Enterprise, including Anson Mount as Captain Christopher Pike. So we did get the titles of all of the episodes as well, but with no real indication of which episode is about what. There are a few things we can piece together, however. One episode features Spock and Number 1 stuck in a turbolift, written by Michael Chabon. This would seem to be the episode Q&A, as that title kind of fits the tone of that from the teaser the best. We also have another short that is set in the Pike-era Enterprise as well, and this has tribbles, which is interesting. And the tone from the trailer seems to give this as a horror episode about tribbles, which is definitely interesting. And I'm embarrassed to say it took 3 watches of this trailer for me to realize that H. John Benjamin, star of Archer and Bob's Burgers, is one of the guys in this trailer who kind of seems to be the main character of this trailer. So very interesting there, and welcome to H. John Benjamin to Star Trek. There is another one that does star Anson Mount as Captain Christopher Pike as well. We also learned that one of the Short Treks episodes would be a teaser of sorts for Star Trek Picard, showing some of the backstory that leads into the series. Not entirely certain which parts of the trailer feature that story, if any, but if I were to guess, it would be, you know, there's this shot here and these 2 children that might have something to do with that storyline. And my guess, based on this still from the Star Trek Picard trailer, is that this episode might be Children of Mars. And finally, the final 2 episodes of Short Treks are the animated episodes, which had been previously announced, one of which is being directed by Michael Giacchino. We don't have any plot details exactly for each of the episodes, but the titles of all 6 are Ask Not, Q&A, The Trouble with Edward, The Girl Who Made the Stars, Epheum and Dot, and Children of Mars. So if I were to guess, this is just a total guess, I would say Epheum and Dot and The Girl Who Made the Stars may be the animated ones. The Trouble with Edward is the Tribble episode, I believe. Q&A is Spock and Number 1 in the turbolift. And Ask Not, I'm not entirely certain what that one might be about. And Children of Mars, my guess is that that's the Picard lead-in episode. So I'm going to do a quick kind of breakdown and analysis, shot by shot, almost shot by shot, scene by scene of the trailer that they put out at the San Diego Comic-Con. So we start with this kind of jaunty string instrument motif here, and some quick shots of a blue corridor, kind of hard to make out, it's blurred, and we see Spock here. And it looks as though this is leading to him beaming aboard the Enterprise as a newly minted ensign. And in the first fun little bit here, we get Spock kind of yelling, "Sir, Ensign Spock here, reporting for duty," kind of really echoing that early shouty Spock that we got in The Cage especially. Number 1, of course, tells him that there's no need to shout. And this is a nice little touchstone with regards to how Spock was characterized in The Cage. We also get a look at the Enterprise's transporter room, which has the same rough layout as Discovery's transporter room, but the background, the back wall, has that more kind of TOS transporter room look to it. We also see that Spock's a little smilier, kind of like he was back in The Cage as well. So one thing from this trailer is all of the scenes and plots from the episode seem to be kind of mashed together in some areas with no clear delineation as to which episode is which. So we're getting a Pike voiceover on this part, but I believe my best guess for this shot from behind is of a Romulan, possibly a Vulcan, but given the number of Romulans that we saw in the Picard trailer, I think these might be the Picard prequel Short Treks episode. Obviously, it has nothing to do with Pike, that's unrelated and comes into play in a couple later shots. We get a couple quick shots of these children, which for no other reason other than the word children is in the title, may be related to the Short Treks episode Children of Mars. We get Pike's voiceover saying, "The Enterprise picked up a distress call from the USS Bauman. I need you to let me out of here." So it seems that Pike is being detained for some reason. We see him or perhaps someone else being escorted by 2 security officers, and he appears to have a bag over his head, if this is indeed Pike and related to that previous shot. And the security officer to whom he is speaking says, "You're a prisoner. Your orders carry no weight anymore." And Pike replies, "When this is all done, you'll never see the inside of a starship again." And you can clearly see in this shot that Pike's hands are bound, and there seems to be some sort of damage to the set in the background, or at least something scattered. Not sure exactly what's going on. There's also, of course, red alert klaxons and lights going off. So some sort of emergency situation for which Pike is possibly being blamed. Then we transition into some scenes, I believe, from the Short Treks episode, possibly Q&A, just based on the title, in which Spock and Number One are in a turbolift. There's kind of this awkward silence and protracted pregnant pauses, and Number One says, "People don't talk in elevators." Spock replies, "I have observed that, sir." And they both together say, "Fascinating," catching each other kind of off guard. Then, of course, it turns into a stuck in the elevator episode as there's some sort of shaking, the ship is possibly under attack, and the turbolift comes to a halt. And in the next scene, we see that Spock and Number One are stuck in the turbolift. Spock seems to be asking a number of fairly mundane questions, possibly to try and make small talk, asking what version of the OS are the Enterprise's computers running? Do the food synthesizers use the Gupta or the Katzmann glucose matrix? Have you ever considered that the Prime Directive is not only not ethical, but also illogical? And obviously Spock's continued questions are taking their toll on Number One, who is incredibly bored by the conversation. And Spock closes his questioning with, "Do you like eggplant?" Next we transition into what I believe is probably the episode The Trouble with Edward, in which we finally, for the first time, see a Tribble actually giving birth. And then we see H. John Benjamin as a science officer, and he says, "People call them Tribbles." And we see, of course, a table filled with Tribbles, and we know this is not going to go well. Not entirely certain what ship this is exactly, but we can see the captain and 3 science officers sitting at a table, and the captain says, "Pretty darn cute." And another science lieutenant says, "Aw," when looking at the Tribbles. We then see H. John Benjamin's character in a corridor, who may be the show's Edward, referred to in the title, and a lieutenant reports to him there's been a breach in the lab. We get a few different shots of Tribbles obviously having escaped containment, and H. John Benjamin's character yelling, "I made one of the most important discoveries of our time!" Amazingly, even after hearing this, the typical H. John Benjamin character crazed screaming, I didn't realize it was him when I first watched this trailer, and now I'm like, how could I have not realized this was Archer or Bob from Bob's Burgers? That's just crazy to me. That voice is so distinctive. Then we get various shots, of course, of cabinets opening and Tribbles spilling out, threatening to overwhelm this ship. And we get Pike speaking to the captain that we saw earlier, "Don't show any weakness or they will eat you alive." Now, I think in this scene he's not referring to the Tribbles directly. I think she's a new captain taking command of her ship for the first time, and Pike is kind of giving her advice. But, of course, that line takes on a greater significance when we see the kind of next scene here, which is kind of, Tribbles turned into a horror movie, it seems. Like, taken to the logical extreme, if the trouble with Tribbles had continued and they completely overwhelmed the Enterprise, what would have happened? They would have squeezed out all of the people, of course. And that may be what we're seeing happening here. So, interesting. I like the idea of a horror story featuring the Tribbles. And that may be what we're getting. Maybe it's just how the trailer is presented, but I think that would make for a really fascinating story. And then we get the reveal of all of the titles of the episodes. And again, at the top, I kind of said which one I think is which. Don't know if that's accurate. Those are just complete guesses. But, with some maybe logical deductions, maybe not. Maybe I'm completely wrong and these are all totally different. I'm pretty sure about The Trouble with Edward, though. And then another shot of Pike, I think, talking to the captain from The Trouble with Edward as she joins her ship. And he says to her, "Good luck out there, Captain." And then a little stinger scene right at the end that I'm really confused about and is very kind of off-putting. This young girl in a Starfleet uniform, it looks like, but obviously very young, with a very small Tribble in her spoon.
So furry! It tickles!
And then closing on starting this fall, CBS All Access. So we don't have a concrete date for when these will drop, but it looks like this fall is when we'll be getting the first episode. And if it follows the pattern of the previous season of Short Treks, it'll be one per month. So really looking forward to these. I really like how Alex Kurtzman described them as kind of a proving ground for new ideas for Star Trek and for new talent and new voices. So I like how experimental these are. And it really bodes well, I think, for bringing new talent to Star Trek and doing some new and different things that have never been done before. So kudos to them for this Short Treks idea. I really hope that we get some really interesting and fascinating stories, even if some of them might be a little weird. I'm definitely looking forward to them. So what did you all think of the trailer for Short Treks? Are you looking forward to them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, though. I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much to the Patreon supporters for their help as always, and thank you to everyone else for liking, sharing, and subscribing if you felt this video was worthy. Stay tuned for more news from San Diego Comic-Con with regards to Star Trek Discovery Season 3, as well as what I forgot to mention at the top of the show, Star Trek Lower Decks, the new animated series. I'm planning on making a video all about that as well. So stay tuned for those. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, live long and prosper.